Park Ji-woo's team moved silently. No heavy footsteps, no mechanical sounds. They blended into the rocky terrain like living shadows. Lee Dae-sung carried the sound device from earlier. But now it wasn't just listening, it was communicating, sending out careful frequencies that mimicked the planet's natural rhythms. Each pulse was a subtle message, like a whispered conversation with the landscape itself. Choi Yoongi's holographic display remained active, tracking invisible pathways. His fingers moved across the screen, creating complex mathematical models that predicted potential creature movements. He wasn't just tracking, he was understanding. Kim Hyun-woo carried what looked like a cooking kit, but experienced researchers knew it was something more. Specialized tools designed for multiple purposes. Each container held not just food, but potential survival solutions. Ji-woo led the team. His movements were slow, calculated. Every step calculated with mathematical precision. He wasn't walking, he was becoming part of the environment. Kilometers away, something massive stirred. The Vortex Hunter emerged from its hidden cave. 3 meters of pure biological destruction. Multiple limbs that could slice through solid rock. An exoskeleton that deflected most known weapons. Camouflage capabilities that made it nearly invisible. But the humans didn't stop, didn't retreat. Dae-sung's sound device began a complex sequence. Frequencies that confused the creature's natural hunting patterns. Not attacking, not defending. Simply disrupting its understanding of the environment. Yoongi's display predicted the creature's potential movement paths. Each potential route was calculated, analyzed, understood. The humans weren't fighting the Vortex Hunter. They were communicating with it. Hyun-woo prepared something from his kit. Not a weapon. Something that looked like a specialized chemical mixture. Something that would interact with the creature's biological system in a way nobody had ever attempted. Kim Hanul watched from the research station. Her breath stopped. Her scientific understanding challenged with every passing moment. The Vortex Hunter moved closer, massive, deadly, absolutely confident in its position as the apex predator. Ji-woo raised his hand. A simple gesture, but it contained volumes of information. The team stopped moving, completely still, their environmental suits now matching the exact thermal and visual signatures of the surrounding rocks. They weren't hiding. They were becoming invisible by understanding. The Vortex Hunter's multiple sensory organs searched, probed, analyzed, but the humans had already solved the equation. Dae-sung's device continued its complex sound sequence, creating audio patterns that mimicked the creature's own communication methods. Not blocking, not attacking, simply speaking its language. Yoongi's calculations showed every potential movement, every potential attack vector. The humans were 3 steps ahead of a creature that had dominated this planet for millennia. Hyun-woo's chemical mixture remained prepared, not as a weapon, but as a potential interaction point. The Vortex Hunter was now meters away, close enough to destroy, close enough to kill. But something was different. It stopped. Ji-woo's hand remained raised, a gesture of communication, of understanding, of respect. The alien research team watched in complete shock. The Vortex Hunter, a creature that destroyed. Everything in its path was communicating with humans, not fighting, not running, communicating. Kim Hanul realized something fundamental was happening. These weren't just humans exploring a planet. They were rewriting the entire understanding of planetary interaction. The hunt wasn't about destruction, it was about understanding. And in that moment, everything changed. The Vortex Hunter stood massive and terrible, its multiple razor-sharp appendages casting deadly shadows across the rocky terrain. Park Ji-woo didn't move, not a muscle, not a breath. Lee Dae-sung's sound device pulsed with complicated frequencies. Each wave was a message, a communication attempt that no species had ever tried before. The device wasn't blocking the creature's sensory systems. It was speaking to them. Choi Yoongi's holographic display showed complex mathematical predictions. Every potential movement of the Vortex Hunter was calculated, analyzed, understood. The humans weren't preparing to fight. They were preparing to interact. Kim Hyun-woo held a specialized container, not a weapon, something more complex, a mixture that could potentially change the entire dynamic of the interaction. The Vortex Hunter could slice through solid rock. Its exoskeleton deflected most known weapons. Its camouflage abilities made it nearly invisible. Generations of planetary researchers had considered it an impossible creature to approach, but the humans weren't most researchers. Jiwoo's hand remained raised, a gesture of communication, of understanding, of respect. The creature's multiple sensory organs scanned, probed, analyzed. Something was different about these beings. They didn't feel like prey. They didn't feel like predators. They felt like something else entirely. Daesung's device continued its complex sound sequence, mimicking the creature's own communication patterns, not blocking, not attacking, simply speaking its language, Jungi's. Calculations showed every potential scenario. The humans were thinking 10 steps ahead of a creature that had dominated this planet for thousands of years. Hyun-woo's container remained ready, a potential interaction point, a bridge between two completely different biological systems. Kilometers away, Kim Han-il watched through the research station's monitors. Her scientific understanding was being completely rewritten with each passing second. The Vortex Hunter took one step forward. The ground shook, rocks trembled. The entire landscape seemed to respond to its movement. Jiwoo took one step forward. Slow, calculated, respectful. The alien research team held their collective breath. What was happening wasn't a hunt. It wasn't a battle. It was a conversation. Daesung's device changed frequency. Each pulse now carried complex information, not just sound, not just communication, but a form of understanding that transcended traditional biological interactions. The Vortex Hunter's appendages, capable of slicing through solid metal, remained suspended, waiting, analyzing. Uni's display showed something extraordinary. The creature's internal systems were responding, not with aggression, but with curiosity. Hyun-woo moved slightly. The container in his hand caught a reflection of moonlight. The Vortex Hunter's sensory systems tracked the movement. Jiwoo remained the focal point. His body language spoke volumes. No fear, no aggression, complete understanding. The research station fell completely silent. Even the background systems seemed to stop. The Vortex Hunter was close enough to destroy everything, close enough to end the entire expedition with a single movement. But it didn't. Something was happening that no researcher had ever documented. A communication, an interaction, a potential understanding between two completely different biological systems. Daesung's device pulsed again. A message. A bridge. Jungi's display showed changing patterns. The creature was responding, not attacking. Analyzing, Hyun-woo's container remained prepared. A potential solution, a potential connection. Jiwoo's hand remained raised, a gesture of peace. The Vortex Hunter took another step, not forward, not backward, but sideways, a movement of communication, of potential understanding. The hunt was no longer a hunt. It had become something else entirely, a conversation between worlds. The Vortex Hunter lay motionless on the rocky ground. What had seemed impossible moments ago was now a shocking reality. Park Jiwoo approached the massive creature with a calm that defied all scientific understanding. Kim Hyun-woo opened his specialized container. Instead of weapons, he pulled out cooking tools, knives that seemed too delicate for such a massive creature, spice containers that looked completely out of place in this alien landscape. Lee Daesung's sound device continued its gentle pulsing. Not a weapon, not a threat, just a continuous communication that seemed to keep the surrounding environment. Calm Choi Jungi's holographic display tracked every movement, every biological signal. The creature wasn't dead. It was something else entirely. Kim Han-il watched from the research station, her mouth open in complete disbelief. Jiwoo began to carefully cut into the Vortex Hunter's exoskeleton. Each movement was precise, surgical, respectful. It wasn't a butchering, it was almost like a ritual. Hyun-woo started preparing something that looked like a cooking station. Portable heat sources appeared. Specialized containers came out. The cooking equipment looked more like a scientific lab than a kitchen. The alien researchers gathered around their monitors. No one spoke. No one could comprehend what they were seeing. Jiwoo's team worked together with a synchronization that seemed almost impossible. Each movement calculated, each action purposeful. They were transforming a potential battle into something else entirely. Spices came out. Strange mixtures that Hanyul couldn't identify. Hyunwoo moved with the precision of a chef and the carefulness of a surgeon. He was preparing to cook the planet's most dangerous creature. The first pieces of meat hit the cooking surface. Instead of a brutal scene, it looked almost like a carefully planned culinary experiment. Steam rose, spices sizzled. The smell began to fill the research station's monitoring systems. Daesung's sound device changed frequency. Now it seemed to be communicating with the cooking process itself. Each pulse matched the rhythm of the cooking meat. Yoongi's display showed biological breakdowns, nutritional analyses. The team wasn't just cooking, they were studying, understanding. Hanyul realized something fundamental was happening. These weren't just explorers. They weren't just researchers. They were translating an entire planetary experience into a meal. Jiwoo looked up, directly at the research station's main camera. That smile again, the smile that suggested he knew something nobody else understood. Vortex Hunter's body was being transformed, not destroyed, not wasted, but understood, respected. Hyunwoo's cooking became more complex. Layers of flavors emerged, techniques that seemed to blend scientific precision with culinary art. The alien. Researchers' monitors filled with data, biological readings, nutritional information, cooking temperatures. But something else was happening. The creature wasn't just being cooked, it was being honored. Steam rose, spices danced. The rocky landscape of Krasnar seemed to watch. Jiwoo cut a piece of the cooked meat, held it up, examined. It with the same care a scientist might examine a rare specimen. Daesung's device pulsed, a final communication, a final respect. Yoongi's display showed complete biological integration. The meal was more than food. It was information, understanding. Hanyul understood now. This wasn't just a hunt. This wasn't just a meal. This was a conversation between species, between worlds. The first piece of meat was prepared, perfectly cooked, scientifically precise, culturally respectful. Jiwoo took a bite, and everything changed. The twin moons of Krasnar hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the rocky, rust-colored terrain. Kim Hanyul watched the human expedition team through her advanced research scanner, her fingers tracing the holographic display with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Park Jiwoo stood at the edge of their base camp, his environmental suit a sleek second skin that seemed to breathe with the alien landscape. Around him, his team of 4 researchers prepared their equipment, moving with a precision that felt almost mechanical to the local alien research team. "We're hunting dinner tonight," Jiwoo said casually, his voice cutting through the thin metallic atmosphere of the planet. He pointed toward a distant mountain range where jagged peaks disappeared into swirling emerald clouds. The alien researchers, mix of tentacled and crystalline beings, burst into a series of high-pitched sounds that might have been laughter. Hunting on Krasnar. The very idea was absurd. This planet was home to the Vortex Hunters, creatures so deadly that entire spacefaring civilizations avoided its surface. Hanyul watched closely. Something about the human's demeanor was different. While her colleagues continued their mocking sounds, she noticed how Jiwoo's eyes moved, calculating, observing, completely unafraid. The Krasnar research station had seen many expeditions, but none quite like this human team. They carried equipment that looked almost toy-like compared to the massive survival gear of previous exploration groups. No heavy plasma shields, no reinforced exosuits, just what seemed to be a collection of lightweight tools and what looked like cooking equipment. "You understand?" one of the senior alien researchers named Krillix said, addressing Jiwoo with a translated voice that buzzed with electronic undertones, "that the Vortex Hunters have destroyed entire military squadrons? They're not something you hunt. They hunt you." Jiwoo simply smiled. It was a smile that made Hanul uncomfortable, not threatening, but something worse, something that suggested complete confidence. The human team began their evening preparations. They weren't setting up defensive positions or checking weapon systems. Instead, they seemed to be organizing what looked like a cooking area. Small portable equipment came out, containers of unknown spices, cutting tools that looked more suited to a kitchen than a dangerous alien landscape. Hanul's scientific mind raced. She had spent 15 years studying Krasnar's ecosystem. She knew every dangerous creature, every toxic plant, every deadly wind current. The vortex hunters were the apex predators of this world, massive creatures with multiple razor-sharp limbs, the ability to camouflage perfectly, and a hunting technique that made them invisible until the moment of attack. No one hunted them. They hunted everything else. As night began to fall, the temperature dropped rapidly. The alien research team retreated inside their protective domes. The humans remained outside, seemingly unbothered by the dropping temperature that would freeze. Most biological systems, Jiwoo's team of 4, Lee Dae-sung, Choi Yoongi, Kim Hyun-woo, and himself, began setting up what looked like a casual camping site. They talked quietly, occasionally laughing, completely at ease in an environment that should have killed them within minutes. Hanul couldn't look away. Something was happening that defied everything she knew about planetary survival. The humans moved with a fluid grace that suggested they saw the dangerous environment not as a threat, but as a challenge. "This is impossible," she muttered to herself, adjusting her thermal imaging. The scanner showed the humans' body temperatures remaining stable, their movements precise and controlled. As the first of Krasnar's 3 moons rose, casting a deep, emerald light across the landscape, Park Ji-woo looked directly at Hanul's observation window. For a moment their eyes met. That smile again. Not a predator's smile, not a conqueror's smile, but the smile of someone who knew something nobody else did. The hunt was about to begin. The research station fell silent as Park Ji-woo's team began their strange preparation. Kim Hanul watched through her observation window, her breath fogging. The transparent material. Lee Dae-sung pulled out a series of small devices that looked more like kitchen tools than scientific equipment. He carefully arranged them on a portable table, each item placed with surgical precision. The devices hummed softly, emitting a low-frequency sound that seemed to vibrate with an unusual rhythm. Choi Yoongi began mapping something on a holographic display. It wasn't a typical terrain scan. Instead, he was tracking something more complex, the behavioral patterns of the vortex hunters. His fingers moved quickly, creating intricate web-like connections between different environmental markers. "Look, their tracking method," Krillix mumbled beside Hanul. "It's completely different from our standard approach. The humans weren't using traditional tracking technology. They were studying the ecosystem itself." Yoongi's display showed wind currents, ground temperature variations, mineral deposits, and what seemed like invisible pathways that only they could understand. Kim Hyun-woo began preparing something that looked like food supplies. But these weren't standard expedition rations. He was mixing spices, checking temperature-controlled containers, and preparing what appeared to be a complex meal preparation system. Ji-woo himself was different. He moved between team members, checking each preparation, offering small suggestions. His movements were calm, almost meditative. He wasn't just leading, he was understanding. "They're not preparing to fight," Hanul whispered to herself. "They're preparing to survive, to blend in." The team's equipment was minimal. No heavy weapons, no massive protective shields. Just lightweight tools that seemed to communicate with the environment in a way Hanul had never seen before. Dae-sung pulled out a small device that looked like a sound generator. But when he activated it, the entire research station felt a subtle change. The device wasn't creating sound, it was listening, capturing the unique audio signatures of the Krasnar landscape. Yoongi's holographic display began to pulse with new information. The sound device was mapping something invisible, the communication patterns of the ecosystem itself. How different. Creatures moved, how they communicated, the hidden language of the planet. "Impossible," Krillix muttered, but he didn't sound confident anymore. Hyun-woo continued his food preparation. He was creating something that looked like a survival kit, But it was more than that. Each container was carefully balanced, each spice mixture was precise. He was preparing not just for survival, but for adaptation. Jiwoo watched his team work. His eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail. He wasn't just observing, he was understanding. The humans were treating the dangerous Krasnar environment like a complex puzzle to be solved, not a threat to be defeated. The research station's alien scientists were confused. Their traditional tracking methods involved massive equipment, complex scanning systems, multiple protective layers. These humans had stripped everything down to its most basic form. As night fell, the team's preparations became more intense. They weren't setting up defensive positions, they were becoming part of the landscape. Hanul realized something fundamental was happening. These humans weren't approaching Krasnar as conquerors or researchers. They were approaching it as participants, as part of the ecosystem itself. Daesung's sound device began to pulse with a rhythm that matched the distant mountain ranges. Yoongi's display showed complex movement patterns that seemed to predict the Vortex Hunter's potential paths. Hyunwoo's food preparation looked less like expedition supplies and more like a sophisticated communication method. And Jiwoo watched, always watching, understanding. The alien research team had gone quiet. Their previous laughter had disappeared. Something was happening that challenged everything they knew about survival, about exploration, about understanding an alien world. The preparation was complete. But it wasn't in preparation for a hunt. It was a preparation for a conversation, with a planet that nobody had ever truly listened to before. Darkness consumed the Krasnar landscape like thick ink spilling across a canvas. The research station's external monitors showed nothing but shadows and subtle movement.